Buenos días, Megan.
Buenos días.
You grew up in Colorado, surrounded by amazing landscapes, and in 2015 you decided to embark on an expedition in the United States with your partner Jimmy James Canales. What was the aim of the expedition and how did it go?
The main goal, there was many, but the main goal was to ask this question, which is, what is the role of landscape in contemporary art? Because it's not an easy question. Every generation puts its own, or builds its own kind of moral construction around landscape, what it means. And the artist is producing landscapes with that ethos. So it's hard for a contemporary artist to look at landscape without being critical of the history, like the many complicated layers of human activity, often tragic, ecological disaster, fantasies of pristine wilderness, like all of these things kind of weigh down on you, and then, or they complicate things. And then also there's this act of just making something beautiful. It sometimes seems very absurd in a world where everything feels like it's burning down. You know, like even just this morning, there was news of a violent attack on a primary school in England. And it's like, what does it mean that I'm here in a beautiful place making beautiful paintings about landscapes when things like that are unfolding every day? So I think what I learned during that trip is that to paint a landscape, first you have to give yourself permission to paint a landscape. You have to take those voices and you have to just quiet them, like the cynical voice, the terrified voice, the heartbroken voice, the critical voice. All those voices are so important. But what's also important is this notion that being in these beautiful places is nourishing, and it offers us rest and it offers us clarity. So that when we do return back to our communities, we are bolstered, you know, we have more courage, we understand what's worth fighting for, we understand what's important. And that beauty is an important part of our humanity. You know, so to deny that in light of all these other things that we think about would also be a tragedy. And so I learned, I think, to separate these spaces in my mind as an artist. And to allow myself to fall in love with the landscape, to allow for wonder and awe as like a human inheritance, you know. So I think that was the biggest impact of that experience.
You talk about terrestrial landscapes becoming psychological landscapes. What do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, like an experience of a landscape is psychological. The landscape impresses itself onto you. You become the negative shape of that landscape, you know, informed by its forms and its scale. There's a part of you that only exists in that landscape. And sometimes that's why it's so hard to leave a beautiful place, because you have to leave a part of yourself. Sometimes never to return. You have to say goodbye, that's very hard. But even if you did go back, you're not going back to the same landscape. It's changed. You're changed, right? So there's this wonder and loss built in, always. So that's the experience, the psychological experience of a landscape itself. In my paintings, I tried to leave a lot of ambiguity or conflicting information, because the way that vision works is that your vision is actually profoundly influenced by what you expect to see. That is to say, that your brain uses your eyes to confirm its expectations. So when you make an artwork where the brain can't reconcile certain parts of it, or there's space that's confused, or there's areas that are not perfectly detailed, the brain has to complete it in your mind. So the painting gives like a framework, but it's completed in the mind of the viewer, and so each viewer has a different experience. I can't see what you see when you look at these paintings. Like they're informed by the curiosity of the viewer, the experience of the viewer, the mood of the viewer, right? Like that's a psychological experience.
You went through a very hard loss in your family a few years ago. In what extent do you consider it has had an impact on your artwork?
Yes, we did have a very difficult time. We lost a baby in 2020. He was born still. Yeah, right at the beginning of the pandemic, like the week that it hit our city. And you know, it had a profound impact. I didn't make art for a long time. And I just didn't see the point. Like going back to the idea that you have to give yourself permission to make art when it seems maybe what I'm doing is pointless. Like that's how it felt. Just in like the face of like such terror and grief, it just felt useless, you know. And when I did start making art again, it was really personal, small, intimate. This is actually the first time I've made landscapes since. So I was making landscapes for, I don't know, about 5 years, and then it just stopped. So these are the first landscapes I've made since then, and I had to give myself permission to make them. And it felt really good. It felt good because I love this world, you know, and I want my children to love it. And to be able to bring them here and to share the wonder together and for them to be able to watch me process it in the studio. And it's a beautiful thing, but I think that my appreciation of that beauty is deepened by that loss. You know, everything in life yields a pair of opposites. The most profound grief yields the most profound joy on the opposite side, right? And so I learned through that experience kind of radical empathy, and then the importance of joy and the importance of wonder, you know. And I think, you know, that just allows me to enter the studio in a different way.
Tell us about Lanzarote and its landscapes.
That's like the hardest question. It's such a humbling question, you know? It's a dramatic landscape. You know what it is? It's like all of the raw ingredients of the earth that have not yet been mixed together. They're just in big piles everywhere. It's like if I was going to make chocolate chip cookies, for example, and I pour the flour here, and I pour the sugar here, and the chocolate here, and crack some eggs, and then just dump milk, and then put it in the oven. And then cook it at like 1,000 degrees. That would be the landscape here. It's amazing to see the contrast. I've never seen a landscape with such contrast. The smoothness of the sand. If the sand was any softer, it would be mud, you know? And then the dunes. And then you're contrasting that against this like violent, rigid, volcanic landscape that feels like the volcano just finished expelling all of this debris yesterday. You know, it hasn't moved. Like these big rocks that have just been thrown and stuck there, you know, and they're glassy and obsidian, and you can't walk through it. And that's, you know, right next to these, you know, moss-covered trees, and it's like the contrast. And then the light, too, is like you can't take the same picture twice. From 1 second to the next, the light is different, the colors are different, the shadows are different. And so you really feel, you know, you feel geological time unfolding in a way where other places, you know, everything kind of feels frozen. It doesn't feel frozen here. It's incredible to think also that people live here. I mean, it's like a desert. It's a desert. And so to drive through these areas that's like just nothing, and then this tiny little outcrop of houses, you know, just kind of tucked into a landslide or a hillside. And All the fences made of just gritted rock, and it's incredible kind of fortitude and resourcefulness, and I'm sure a lot of effort to make this landscape work, you know, in that way. But I can see why people come here. It's a collage already. You know, I make collages in my artwork, and I got here, I'm like, well, there's nothing left to do. Like, the landscape here is done. There's like all of these things put together. You could never imagine they go together, and they're there. So it's wonderful. It's wild. I hope that I get to come back. Yes.
So, Megan, thank you very much. It was amazing to have you here. Hope that you enjoy Lanzarote and our Nautilus.
So much. It was so nice to be here. Thank you.